Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. President Lee Jae-myung, on the final day of his trip to China, is in Shanghai to meet young entrepreneurs. He's also scheduled to visit a historic building in the city that once served as one of the headquarters of the Korean government in exile during Japan's colonial rule. The world's biggest tech show, the CES, officially kicked off in Las Vegas, with this year's spotlight on physical AI, artificial intelligence that extends beyond software into the physical world around us. South Korean companies are keeping pace with this trend, including Hyundai Motor Group's Boston Dynamics, which showcased its humanoid robot, Atlas. Following the ousting of Venezuela's leader, the U.S. is reportedly preparing to meet with executives from major American oil companies later this week to discuss oil production and exports from the South American country. Meanwhile, the White House confirmed that the U.S. government is discussing a range of options to acquire Greenland, and that utilizing the U.S. military is an option. We begin this morning with President Lee Jae-myung's trip to China. The president is in the Chinese city of Shanghai, where he will meet young entrepreneurs and visit a historical site that represents Korea's fight for independence during Japan's colonial rule. He will then wrap up his 4-day state visit to China. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
The focus of the South Korean leader's final day in China is the economy and history. President Lee Jae-myung will attend the South Korea-China Venture and Startup Summit on Wednesday in Shanghai, known as China's economic and financial hub, to meet young entrepreneurs in content, healthcare, and energy sectors. Later in the day, he will visit the Provisional Government Building in Shanghai, one of several headquarters used by the Korean government in exile during Japanese colonial rule. His visit coincides with the 150th anniversary of the birth of Korean independence activist Kim Gu, as well as the centennial anniversary of the Shanghai Provisional Government. The visit also focuses on the history of the two countries fighting for independence and national sovereignty in the early 20th century, which was touched upon earlier at the Yi-Shi Summit.
Amid deepening global uncertainties, the two leaders agreed to contribute to regional peace based upon their common history of working together to restore national sovereignty.
Yi arrived in Shanghai on Tuesday, where he was hosted by the Party Secretary of Shanghai, Chen Jining, for dinner. The Korean president stressed the importance of a friendly relationship between the two countries, noting the need to address negative sentiment and hate speech targeting each other's countries. President Lee is set to return home as he closes out his 4-day state visit to China that included meetings with Chinese President Xi Jinping and high-level politicians. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Shanghai.
Meanwhile, China has imposed rare earth and technology export controls on Japan, escalating its response to comments made by Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae about Taiwan. China's Ministry of Commerce said on Tuesday that rare earth exports of all dual-use civilian and military items to Japanese military end users, or for uses that enhance Japan's military capabilities, are now banned with immediate effect. It marks Beijing's first use of supply chain and technology restrictions against Japan. Analysts say the timing during South Korean President Lee Jae-myung's state visit to China suggests an effort to weaken South Korea-US-Japan trilateral cooperation. Last November, the Japanese Prime Minister stated in Parliament that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could constitute a survival-threatening situation, potentially triggering Tokyo's right to collective self-defense. And the Trump administration is reportedly preparing to meet with senior executives from major U.S. oil companies later this week. The talks are expected to cover boosting Venezuela's oil production following the ousting of Nicolas Maduro. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The Donald Trump administration is preparing to meet with senior executives from major U.S. oil companies later this week, according to a source cited by Reuters. Tuesday's report says talks are expected to focus on boosting Venezuela's oil production following the U.S. military operation that removed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro from power. The administration is considering a return of U.S. energy companies to Venezuela nearly 2 decades after the country's government took control of U.S.-led oil operations. The White House declined to comment directly on the planned meetings, but said it believes U.S. industry is ready to re-enter Venezuela. The 3 largest U.S. oil companies, ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, and Chevron, did not immediately respond to requests for comment. However, industry analysts cautioned that such plans face significant obstacles, including damaged infrastructure, political instability, an uncertain legal framework, and questions over the durability of U.S. policy toward Venezuela. Meanwhile, interim President Delcy Rodriguez announced the activation of an agro-food industrial and communal high command to protect the country's productive sectors following the attack. She also called for national unity and pledged to maintain the flow of essential goods and industrial production.
Venezuelans, let us keep working so that at the end of 2026, we can say we have fulfilled our duty as a country in national unity. We Venezuelans have fulfilled our duty. All productive sectors have fulfilled their duty to our people and our homeland. And with that, the agro-food, industrial, and communal high command is now in place.
Venezuela's Justice Minister Tarek William Saab described the U.S. military operation as a war crime, saying it was carried out without a declaration of war or United Nations Security Council authorization. He said prosecutors would investigate the incident. Separately, the White House confirmed that President Trump is also discussing a range of options to acquire Greenland, including the possible use of military force after Trump called the territory a U.S. national security priority. Greenland is a semi-autonomous region of Denmark, a fellow member of NATO. European allies have rallied behind Denmark following the remarks. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen warned that any U.S. attack would undermine NATO itself. 6 European nations issued a joint statement affirming that only Greenland and Denmark can decide their future relations. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So President Lee Jae-myung is set to return home after wrapping up his 4-day state visit to China. Meanwhile, the White House says the United States is now discussing options to acquire Greenland, including the use of military. For more on this, we're joined today by Professor Andrew Millard, Assistant Professor of International Relations at Changwon National University. Professor Millard, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So this visit by President Lee Jae-myung was the first state visit by a South Korean president to China in almost a decade, right? How significant was his visit overall?
So you're right. This was the first state visit since 2017. Really overall a very significant visit, but significant for each country on a different level. So for the South Koreans, for President Lee, this visit was really about going to China and really rebuilding bilateral relations between South Korea and China, which for the past 10 years haven't really been that great. But then you also have on the regional level, various different security issues. So we have at the moment the tensions between China and Japan. We have the issue of Taiwan. We also have the issue of North Korea, which President Lee, South Korea really wants China to take a big role in bringing North Korea back to the table for various negotiations with South Korea, but also with the US. And then we have on the global level, of course, all of these issues with trade and security regarding the United States. So for South Korea, it was very much about the bilateral relations, getting this good relationship with China. But for China, and Xi Jinping made this very clear, it was about making sure that South Korea stays on the side of China. So a very significant thing.
Right, and more broadly, another major issue for China right now is the Trump administration's intervention in Venezuela. As you know, Beijing has been the biggest buyer of Venezuelan oil and its largest investor. How might the capture of Maduro affect U.S.-China relations and sort of reshape the geopolitical landscape?
So you're right. So over the past sort of 20, 30 years, China has been really pushing its influence, not just in Venezuela, but really in Latin America, Central South America as the whole. So in terms of this capture of Maduro, what are we likely to see for China? In terms of economic impacts, right now it's a little bit uncertain exactly as to how those investments will be affected. But for the geopolitical situation, this could be very serious. Now, there's two ways to look at this. Firstly, the United States has given a very clear warning to any country in Latin America that if you're not on the side of the US, we are going to take action against you. So this may force several countries to really sort of look again at their relations with China. On the other hand, for China, this could be an opportunity to say, look, we are now the stable country. The United States, they're the ones being a little bit more erratic, whereas China, we're following the multilateral rules-based order, so we are the more stable country, stay on the side of us. Now, in the worst case, if we come back to oil, if Venezuela is no longer going to be supplying China with oil, this may force the Chinese to look for other sources for oil, and therefore this may push China closer to other US adversaries like Russia, Iran, and so on. So this could have very big implications.
Right, and US President Donald Trump has been saying the United States needs Greenland for defense, and the White House actually said this morning that Washington is discussing options to acquire Greenland. So could Greenland be next, and what would the European Union be able to protect it?
Right. So for the past year, and I think we should even say that this is not a Donald Trump policy. America, if you go back in history, has always been looking at Greenland. There's been different periods in the past where it's tried to buy Greenland from Denmark, but has been rejected. So this is not just purely a Donald Trump administration policy. However, Donald Trump has been quite aggressive, even in his first term, but now over the past year, in saying that they need Greenland for security. That doesn't make sense because the US has military bases in Greenland with Denmark's permission. Denmark and the US are both part of NATO, so they're allies in the same country. It doesn't really make sense for security, but it needs it for the resources. For the European Union, could the European Union protect it? The simple answer is no. Simply because the European Union does not have its own military. So for security and military, there's no way it could help. It could potentially give some financial support and diplomatic support. But as you just mentioned before we came on air, right now, there's only a handful of countries showing their diplomatic support. What the European Union really needs to do is have every single member state of the EU together pushing back against the US, having strong diplomatic support.
I see. And it's not just Greenland, because Trump is threatening Colombia and its president and described Cuba as ready to fall. Do you think North Korea may also view the capture of Maduro as a warning or a potential threat?
No. So potentially as a warning, I think maybe North Korea will be looking at this just because the US has shown its capabilities, what it's capable of doing anywhere in the world in capturing this president. However, we need to remember that Venezuela, Greenland, these countries, this is very much the focus of the Western Hemisphere. So going back to the Monroe Doctrine, which Donald Trump is now calling the Donroe Doctrine. So North Korea is not in the Western Hemisphere, so that counts it out. But also, if we look at Greenland, Venezuela, potentially also Colombia and so on, these countries, again, they have resources. So when the US takes that risk of going in, using potentially military to take control, it has something to gain from it. With North Korea, it's not in the Western Hemisphere. And also, would there really be huge resources to gain from any military action? Probably not. So for the North Koreans, I don't think they would be looking at this as a real threat.
I see. All right, Professor Miller, thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
CES 2026 officially kicked off today. The buzzword at this year's CES is undoubtedly physical AI, marking a shift from generative software to intelligence embedded in hardware. Our business editor Kim Do-yeon is at the Las Vegas Convention Center to take us through this trend. Do-yeon, we are hearing a lot about major Korean companies leading this charge. What are you seeing on the ground?
That is right, Unji. I'm here at the Las Vegas Convention Center where the industry is moving beyond your screen-based AI like ChatGPT and Gemini into physical AI. This refers to AI that can perceive, think, and act in the physical world. And one company that's actually leading the shift is Hyundai Motor Group's Boston Dynamics, which unveiled its Atlas here at CES 2026. But first, let's take a listen to the company's vision.
Robots equipped with physical AI. Robots that perceive the world like we do and work responsibly for us and with us. This is technology that is built for humanity. Technology that supports us, extends our capabilities, makes our work safer and in some cases more meaningful.
Now, with their lineup of new robots from early morning, there was a long line to get into the exhibition. While Atlas drew crowds with its fluid movements, another key highlight was the MOBAD, or Mobile Eccentric Droid. It won the Best of Innovation award in the robotics category, marking the first time Hyundai has won this top honor at CES. I also visited the Tucson booth to see their Scan and Go robot. This machine is the epitome of physical AI, winning awards in both the robotics and AI categories. It moves autonomously and scans surfaces to identify areas that need work. Here's how they explain the technology.
So what we're accomplishing with our physical AI is we're giving the ability for the robots to see, think, and act. So the robot is able to see with our 3D vision. So just like a person would, it's able to take a decision based on the meaningful robot movement with our physical AI that's embedded into the system, and finally do the work.
Right, Do-yeon. So it seems the big conglomerates are heavily invested, but this shift must also be creating opportunities for smaller players or those in the supply chain, right? Did you see a variety of companies there?
Yeah, so physical AI requires complex hardware, and that automatically brings attention to component makers. There are companies that make the sensors or develop software to run physical AI. In addition, there are different types of robots, ones that drive like a car to ones that walk on 2 feet. I spoke to one company that provides the LiDAR sensors for robots and vehicles. After attending CES for a decade in smaller booths, the company finally secured a booth on the main show floor this year, citing the rise of physical AI as perfect timing.
Beyond existing cameras actually capturing 3D spatial data, I believe LiDAR is the new core of the physical AI era. In that sense, as a core sensor for physical AI, it is truly an honor and great to be able to exhibit right here in the center of the show.
As for South Korean companies as a whole, while physical AI is not yet a standalone award category, 6 South Korean companies were explicitly identified as winners in the robotics category, or for robotic solutions centered on this new technology. That's all for now. Back to you, Unji.
All right, Do-yeon, thank you for that report. For the first time in 7 months, South Korea's foreign exchange reserves shrank in December last year as authorities took measures to address the weakening Korean won. Our Park Jun-an explains more.
South Korea's foreign reserves fell for the first time in 7 months in December last year due to interventions aimed at managing currency volatility. According to the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, The country's foreign reserves in December stood at just over $428 billion, down $2.6 billion from November. This is the largest December foreign reserves decrease since the Asian financial crisis in 1997. Prior to the drop, South Korea's foreign reserves had risen for 6 consecutive months from a near 5-year low of about $404.6 billion in May to $430.66 billion in November. As of late November, South Korea ranked 9th globally in foreign reserves, with China and Japan ranked 1st and 2nd. In December of last year, foreign exchange authorities in Korea issued strong verbal warnings, telling market participants to be mindful that expectations of further depreciation of the won could lead to unfavorable outcomes. Following government efforts to cool the FX market, the $1 exchange rate saw a drop. The $1 exchange rate, which hovered around 1,484 won in late December before the intervention, closed the year at approximately 1,440 won. Park Junan, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned House Republicans that failing to win the 2026 midterm elections would likely lead Democrats to impeach him. Speaking at a closed-door Republican retreat in Washington on Tuesday, Trump told lawmakers they must hold the House, saying Democrats will, quote, find a reason to impeach him if they retake control. Despite his recent military action in Venezuela, he pivoted to domestic politics by claiming credit for stock market gains while distancing himself from the recent inflation. Trump urged party unity and pressed lawmakers to sell his policies on healthcare, gender issues, and election integrity, while acknowledging that sitting presidents have lost House seats in every midterm since 2006. Republicans currently hold the House by 5 seats, a margin Trump called dangerously thin, with every seat up for grabs this November. Ukraine's allies have signed an agreement to deploy a multinational peacekeeping force if a ceasefire with Russia is reached. At talks in Paris on Tuesday, leaders from 27 European countries, Canada, the United States, NATO, and the EU agreed to back Ukraine with air, land, and sea support and to strengthen its army as the first line of deterrence. U.S. representatives officially backed these security guarantees, suggesting a direct American role in monitoring peace. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said allies identified which countries would lead security efforts on the ground, in the air, and at sea, though each government must still approve binding commitments. An Arctic freeze has brought heavy snow and ice across Europe, killing 6 people and causing widespread travel chaos. In France, authorities reported deadly road accidents and ordered trucks off highways as snow blanketed the Paris region, forcing airport closures. At Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport, around 600 flights were canceled as crews cleared runways and aircraft amid freezing conditions. Sub-zero temperatures also disrupted transport in Britain and the Balkans, shutting schools, halting rail service, and leaving communities struggling with snow, ice, and power outages. In Indonesia, flash floods and landslides triggered by torrential monsoon rains have killed at least 16 people and left 4 missing. That's according to officials on Tuesday in Indonesia's North Sulawesi province. Fast-moving torrents of mud and debris swept away 7 homes and damaged over 140 others in the province early on Monday, forcing more than 680 residents into emergency shelters. Rescue teams recovered bodies as waters receded. Local authorities have declared a 14-day emergency response.
Morning commute was rather comfortable, but chilly winds will pick up as the day goes on, with a much colder evening commute expected. And by tomorrow morning, there will be a sharp drop in temperatures, feeling more like minus 14 degrees Celsius here in the capital. So an extra layer of clothing is a must for tomorrow. Meanwhile, the East Coast remains very dry with no significant precipitation in sight. Dry weather advisories remain in place for parts of the capital area and eastern parts of Korea, with dust levels rising at times. Strong winds will also continue, increasing the risk of wildfires. Please be extra careful with fire safety. And as colder air moves in later on, daytime temperatures will not rise that much. Seoul will stay around 1 degree, Daejeon topping out at 5 degrees under mostly sunny skies, while Jeju could see continuing rain or snow through the afternoon. And speaking of which, winter rain or snow is expected in central regions on Saturday.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.